Hi, well, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's Sunday night, basically the conclusion of Week 3, and we're going to put out our waiver wire video for Week 4. Now, we know we're a little bit ahead of the game on this, so we'll make some adjustments on this a couple days from now when injury reports come in. We start to hear things back from teams, coaches, things like that. But we want to get a jump on it, so here are some players that we think you should consider going into Week 4. Now, these are going to be players you need to consider in deeper leagues. If you're in an 8-team league or 10-team, they may not be players that you even need to consider, but if you're in a deeper league, 12, 14, or 16 team, these are some players to consider. Now, we're basically done with Week 3. Now, we have said the whole year, whenever we've done a video, that it's really hard to establish trends in the league until after about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, at that point, you can really begin to see trends in terms of defensive rankings, players, what was a one-week fluke, or some of the things we really can begin to see. You know, for example, a guy like Hunt, we look at him for Kansas City, the running back. He had a great Week 1. Well, I'll tell you what, he's followed up weeks 1, 2, and 3. We're convinced at this point this guy is the real deal. Initially, we did a video and we said, can this guy finish top 5 in scoring? And I had my concerns putting that much stock into a rookie. But at this point, there's nothing that would tell me it's not possible for him to end up in the top 5, or maybe near the very top in terms of scoring. This guy is the real deal because we're 3 weeks in. So once again, we can begin to sort some things out in terms of trends. Now, the other thing that we would encourage you guys, once again, if you have any questions or concerns in terms of guys to pick up, trades, things like that, who to start, check us out on our website, Fantasy Football Profits on Facebook, or go to our on Facebook, or go to our website, which is Fantasy Football Profits. That's profits with an s.com. Check us out there. Now, right now, what happens a lot in fantasy football, people begin to overreact. That happens all the time. We did a video and a paper and said some of the biggest mistakes that people make in fantasy football. And one of the biggest ones is they let their emotions get in the way. And this happens a lot. People tend to overreact. Whether it's a player that has a big week and they overreact in terms of overvaluing him, or a player has an off week and they want to just dump the player. And I think we saw last week, Ezekiel had a bad week. I think he had 10 carries for 9 yards against the Denver defense, and everybody was losing their mind. Well, you know what? Ezekiel Elliott's going to be fine. That Denver offensive line is going to be fine. They're the best in the NFL. They're going to turn around. He's going to have a great year. Jay today had a bad day, but you know what? They're going to be okay there. Some people that tend to overreact today. Case Keenum. I'm a Vikings fan, so obviously I was very encouraged that he went out and had a big game. We won. That was exciting. But the reality of it, he's a journeyman. This was a fluke week, okay? So let's not get too excited about what he did there. Another thing we talked about last week that really came to fruition this week is we talked about running back situations that are kind of confusing to look at. We did a video on it. One of the confusing situations was Cincinnati. Basically, you've got Bernard, Hill, and Mixon. So who's the guy to turn to there? And we said from the get-go that Mixon has looked as the most explosive back, the most talented back. He's the future of that team. It'll only be a matter of time before he starts getting all the carries. Well, sure enough, they have a new offensive coordinator, and then this week, he got the bulk of the carries. He's the #1 guy at this point. So that happened this weekend, too. So we're pretty excited about that. So I want to get in some players that we think you should consider picking up in the upcoming week. The first player we think you should consider getting is Doug Martin. Doug Martin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he's available in about 20% of leagues, which isn't a lot, but 20% is still a decent amount. If he's out there, you need to grab this guy right now. Now, he still has 1 week left on his suspension, okay? So 1 week that you're going to have to stash him. But here's my thoughts on that. If you wait till next week to try to pick him up, other players will probably pick him up this week. Chance he's going to be out there is a lot lower. Second of all, you're going to have to compete with all the other waiver claims. So once again, if he's out there, just grab him this week, stash him. Now, at this point, it looks like when he comes back, he's going to be the starting guy. Jacquizz Rodgers has looked less than impressive. Okay, and so it looks like when he comes back, he's going to get the bulk of the carries. He's going to be your go-to guy. Now, if you look at Doug Martin, he's been very confused. He's been in the league 5 years. Now, during those 5 years, he's had 2 seasons where he's been spectacular. In fact, during 2 seasons, he's averaged 1,428 yards with a healthy 4.71 yards per carry. But then his other 3 seasons, he's averaging 475 yards with a woeful 3.39 yards per carry during those years. So once again, it's hard to tell who you're going to get. But I will say this, in the preseason right now, Doug Martin looked explosive, he looked fast, he looked strong. And so the fact that he's got no competition, the fact that it's hard to find quality running backs, this is a guy that you need to pick up if he's out there and stash on your bench. Hopefully you're in a league, one of the 20% where he is available. Next guy that you may want to consider, and somebody we'll discuss just briefly, is Robert Woods. Now, the first 3 weeks, first week he had 3 catches, 53 yards. Second week he had 1 for 8. Now he explodes on that huge Thursday night game. I think this surprised everybody. Both teams scored a lot of points. Robert Woods goes out for 7 receptions for 108 yards, okay? He's only owned in 10% of the league. So is he a guy that you could pick up or should pick up? Well, he's 25 years old, so he's still relatively young. Okay, and he had some decent seasons in Buffalo, which didn't have a great quarterback situation there. 1 year he had 699 yards. Then last year he had over 600 yards, and he missed 3 games. Okay, but I think there's a few things that we need to consider. I think he's an okay option if you're desperate for wideout. I'd say he really lines up as a 4 or 5 wideout at this point, but there's times where they're playing the right team and you're desperate, you could start him. But one, he had a big day against a bad San Francisco team. I think another concern for me as far as him being a long-term answer for you in terms of pickups is they spread the ball around a lot. Todd Gurley has been catching a lot of balls in the backfield. You've got Watkins, who obviously had a huge game, and he's their #1 guy. You got Cooper Kupp and Everett at tight end. So once again, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to become the #2 guy. I think he's an okay option at times. Somebody maybe you need to pick up if you're in a pinch. Okay, and so once again, somebody had a big week. He's certainly somebody to pick up, but don't get too excited by his 100 yards. I think once again you have to put that in perspective. Another guy out there that had a huge week this week is Jared Goff. Now, we had talked about him in our deep sleeper pick. A lot of guy overlooked him. He had a bad year last year, but we can't forget this was a #1 overall pick last year. In the first 3 games, he had a quarterback rating twice, one of 117 and one 145. His touchdown interception ratio is 1-5 at this point, or 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, and he's looking really good. He's got a lot of weapons around that can catch the ball, and so here's a guy that I think, once again, he's still a young quarterback. He's still going to make some mistakes, but I think in the occasional spot start against the right team, I think he's a guy that you can maybe look at as a viable option at quarterback, although I want to caution you there. I think that Jared is looking like he's going to be a talented young man in the league, but he's got a rough schedule coming up. 3 of the next 4 weeks, he plays Seattle, the Jaguars, and the New York Giants, and all 3 of those teams are tough against the pass. So once again, I think Jared's the real deal. I think he's a guy you can depend on, but I would spot start him if you're desperate at quarterback against the right team. But once again, I wouldn't pick him up right now and make him your #1 guy simply because he's still young, and 2, he's got a really tough schedule. But once again, he's another guy out there that I think we can look at now as occasionally a good fit for you. Let's stay right there in that same Thursday night game. Look at the San Francisco Giants. What about Pierre Garcon? Okay, he's available in about 20% of leagues right now. And so once again, he's out there in about 20% of leagues, which isn't bad. And so he blows up. He has a huge week, 142 yards on 7 targets. This was great, a great game for him. But it's not the first time. Now, he had 7 catches on 10 targets. Week 1, he had 10 targets, so they're not afraid to use him. And if you look at Pierre Garcon, the best season he's ever had was Shanahan as offensive coordinator. And that year is 2013. He had 113 catches for 1,346 yards. And so once again, here's a guy playing on a team that's going to play from behind a lot. Okay, they're not a very good team, so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. It's going to be a lot of garbage time stats. Pierre Garcon, if he's out there, is a guy you can pick up. And I would say he's going to be a decent I'm hesitant to say #2, but definitely #3 guy. He's a guy that you could definitely be your #3 wideout out there, and he can put you decent numbers up. Once again, Pierre Garcon is a guy who's out there. Pick him up. He won't be out there much longer. Had a good week. Hopefully it's a sign of more things to come. So here's another guy you need to consider picking up, and that's Willie Snead. Now he's available in about 20% of leagues. Now this week he is back from a suspension. He had a 3-game suspension. But this is a guy that moves right into a great situation. He has good rapport with Breeze. Now last year is the #3 wideout. Okay, on the depth chart you had Cook and you had Thomas ahead of him, right? Last year he had 72 receptions for 895 yards. So he's coming back. He's going to become the #2 guy on a team that's got a bad defense that needs to throw the ball a lot to win. So once again, Willie Snead, if he's out there, 20% available in 26% of leagues. Once again, you need to pick this guy up. Willie Snead is your guy to go to. Another guy out there that you may want to pick up is Alec Collins of Baltimore. We talked about him last week, actually. We talked about him in a couple of things, mentioned him in our waiver wire pickup video, and also in a video we talked about confusing backfield situations. Now this guy, okay, we talked about him last week, and this week he goes out 9 carries, 82 yards, has a great week. Okay, he's 5'10", 215 pounds. He's out of Arkansas. It's only his 2nd year, and if you guys remember last year, he was playing for Seattle, had a great preseason, and that really didn't pan out for him. And so, once again, he got picked up by Baltimore. Now, last week he looked good. He had 7 carries, 42 yards for a yards per carry of 6.0. Then this week he had 9 carries for 82 yards for yards per carry of 9.1. Between all the backs there, when you look at West or Allen, whoever that is, right now the most explosive back on the team has been Alec Collins. So I think he's going to continue to see more carries. I think he'll eventually settle into that role. He could be one of those sleeper steal picks we look back at the end of the year that snuck in there. And so once again, get him on your bench. I'm not sure that I would start him at this point, but I certainly would stash him on my bench. So once again, if he's out there, you need to pick this guy up Alec Collins is looking very solid at this point. So here's another guy to consider picking up, and he's kind of a name from the past. Many of you guys will recognize Jamaal Charles. He's actually available in 67% of leagues out there right now. And a few years ago, this guy was a top 5 running back. He was a stud who was derailed by 2 ACL injuries where he tore his ACLs and had surgery, so he kind of forgot about the guy. But he's looking good for Denver. In fact, each week he looks stronger and stronger. Now, he hasn't got a lot of carries. Okay, the first week he had 9 carries, then he had 10 and 10, so his carries aren't a lot. But today he out-carried Anderson. His yards per carry were a lot better at 6.2, and Anderson's were only 4.5, and he got a touchdown today. And so, once again, here's a guy that, because of his past, his potential, and team he plays for, you definitely have to consider him. Now, the problem with this situation is I don't think they're going to give him 20, 25 carries a game because of his history of health injuries. But if Anderson goes down, or if you're desperate for running back, he's definitely a guy that you could play on there. Once again, Jamaal Charles is looking better and better every week. Pick him up. He's available in 67% of leagues. So right now I want to talk about the Eagles' backfield situation. Now, what are we going to make of that? Well, there's basically 3 guys right now getting carries. Now, one of the guys that kind of came out of the shadows this week was a guy named Corey Clement, a rookie. Now, we talked about him in a video we called Deep Sleepers. He's a guy that had looked good in preseason, a guy we thought would move into the role, and sure enough, this week they increased his role. He got more carries and actually got a touchdown. Okay. Now, the same week that he did that, Smallwood and Blunt also got 12 carries each, and they actually played pretty well. Both of them, the yards per carry were very good. Smallwood was slightly better than Blunt, but Blunt had a good game. And so, how does it all work itself out? Well, unfortunately, it's really hard to pin down one guy at this point, but here's what I think is going to happen. I think Clement's got a future in the team, but I think that's more off. I don't think it's right now. He'll see an occasional carry here and there. But I think Blunt's going to be your plow, your go-to guy. He's going to run between the tackles, get the goal line carries. Now, Smallwood's a little bit smaller, so he brings more to the passing game, and I think that's what you're going to see, split carries. I wouldn't be surprised to see Blunt get 15 to 18 carries per game, Smallwood get maybe 8 to 10, a couple targets in the passing game once again, so that's where it's at. Now, Blunt is available in 33% of leagues out there once again. A lot of people wrote him off. He got dropped in a lot of leagues, and then Blunt, he showed some life today, showed that he still got some gas in the tank there. So once again, Blunt is a guy you may want to consider. Smallwood's got a little bit of value, although I'm really hesitant to use him. And once again, Corey Clement is a guy, but he's more of a guy you want to keep your eye on. Somebody you wouldn't want to pick up now, but maybe at the end of the year, maybe somebody for next year in a dynasty league. So once again, those are some things to consider for pickups there. So here's on to our next guy. Now, any wide receiver that plays for Packers you need to consider. They don't run the ball that much. They don't run the ball that effectively. And Aaron Rodgers is a phenomenal quarterback. And it's hard for me to say that because I'm a Vikings fan, but you can't ignore how good Aaron Rodgers is. Well, Geronimo Ellison went out today. He had 6 catches for 123 yards. Boom. So there you go, right? He's a guy we should pick up? Maybe. Here's what I would say about him. He's available in almost all leagues right now. Okay, now he's 6'3", knows he's a second-year player, but the reason why he got so much action today is they're playing from behind, and Cobb was out with an injury. Okay, so he was the number 3 guy. Nelson was ahead of him. Adams was ahead of him. And he was number 3 guy. So today he had a big game. But I would say this: if you're really desperate, or if the Packers have injuries at wideout, once again, if Cobb stays out, or if another wide receiver is limited because of injuries, then I think he has value. Okay, but don't get too excited right now. Once again, he's the number 3 guy still. And Cobb was out this week. Once Cobb's back and he becomes the number 4 guy, it's really hard to depend on him. But once again, he's a guy you definitely want to keep on your radar. If you got some room on your bench, I suppose you could stash him. But once again, don't get too excited about him. But if somebody goes down with a season-ending injury, or if Nelson has some of those nagging leg injuries, or if Cobb doesn't come back right away, yeah, he's definitely somebody to consider. Once again, Geronimo Ellison, wide receiver of the Packers. So Chris Thompson, and you know what? I don't know why I'm talking about this guy again, because we've talked about him in a number of videos. Our PPR video, our waiver wire video. He's a guy that we have highlighted a number of times, and he is still available in 25% of leagues. Okay, tonight he goes out 188 yards. Okay, he's had 4 TDs in 3 games. Now, before the season started, the coach said they loved him. They're going to increase his role, and that's exactly what they've done. This guy is lightning. He's electricity out there. When he touches the ball, he makes things happen. And so I don't know why he's out there in 25% of league, especially if you're in a PPR league. Once again, if you're in a standard league, his value is not nearly as good. Okay, he's not going to get a ton of carries, but they're getting the ball, and they're getting the ball often. Okay, and so once again, if he's out there, it's hard to ignore how talented this guy is. Chris Thompson, once again, he's getting touches, he's getting looks, he's getting targets. He can do both. He can run the ball effectively and catch the ball at the backfield. He's not a big back, so they're not going to give him 20 carries a game, but he's definitely a guy that you need to pick up out there. Once again, this guy has been lights out. He's getting better and better every week. After this week, maybe he'll be available maybe 5 to 10% of leagues. Once again, Chris Thompson, go ahead and grab this guy. So what about Travis Benjamin as a guy to pick up? Now, 2 years ago, he had a breakout year for Cleveland. He had over 900 yards. Now, today, he goes over 100 yards. So is he a guy to pick up? Well, you know what? I'm hesitant to say that he's that answer. I think, he had a good game. But one, there's a lot of mouths to feed there. Okay, you look at Allen, Gates, Henry, Ty Williams. In fact, they're playing from behind today, Kansas City. His stats were elevated. And here's another thing to consider on that team there. Mike Williams is due back soon. So once again, Travis Benjamin is not a guy that I would put a lot of stock in at this point. He had a good week. Maybe he's a spot start as a 4 or 5 wide out. But once again, don't get too excited about Travis Benjamin in terms of him being your long-term answer, okay? So today, one of the things that really shocked me today, or a number of things, is some of the quarterbacks in the NFL that kind of came out of nowhere to have big weeks. So we're kind of talking about quarterback resurgence. Are these guys that we can really look at? And so I first want to look at is Brissett there, the quarterback for the Colts. Now, is he a guy that you can consider? He had a really good game. He threw for a touchdown pass. He ran 2 win. Okay, well, first of all, I would say this. One, Andrew Luck is due back week 6. That's what they're tentatively saying right now. He'll be due back from his injury. 2, he's playing against Cleveland. Like, that should just be enough right there, okay? It's Cleveland. It's the Browns, so I wouldn't get too excited. Once again, I don't think that he's a long-term answer. If you look at the first 2 weeks, he wasn't spectacular. Yes, he had a good week against Cleveland, but Luck's coming back soon. Once again, I wouldn't really look at him as a viable option, okay? So I would just kind of get him off the table. 2, what about Case Keenum? Once again, being a Vikings fan, I was discouraged. Sam Bradford was out. Man, Case goes out, and he has a phenomenal week. Okay, well, there's a few reasons why he did that. One, the Vikings offensive line is much improved this year than it was last year, although it didn't take much to improve that line. 2, he's got good weapons around him. Stephon Diggs is a great wideout. When he's healthy, he can be a number 1 dominant top 10 or 15 wideout in the league. Then Adam Thielen, that guy has been lights out for 2 years now. He's great. You got Randolph at tight end. And Dalvin Cooks, what a steal in the second round. This guy is phenomenal. This running back is the real deal. And he can catch the ball in the backfield, right? Okay, so all those things, the weapons, improve offensive line, there's a lot of things going on there. It certainly gives me as a Vikings fan excitement. But I've got to temper that excitement, right? We talked about putting our emotions aside. There's a reason why Case has been around the league. Okay, he's a journeyman. And if you look at his stats, you look at his numbers, once again, I don't think there's any reason to think that he's going to be a long-term answer. Maybe if you get really desperate, you could start him. Once again, had a great week. I'm happy for that. Hopefully, adds stability to the Vikings. Hopefully, we can win some games with our defense and our running game. But no, Case Keenum is nothing more than a journeyman who had a great game. Okay, let's not get too excited. Then what about the other guy? There's a guy that we've been really had some red flags on, and that's Blake Bortles. He went out and he had a good week today. Okay, I've got to acknowledge he had 4 TDs. But besides this game, he has struggled. He struggled last year. He struggled his rookie year. He struggled in camp. He struggled a little bit the first 2 games of the season, and then today he comes out and he has a great game. He's not somebody that I would pick up right now. He's not somebody that I'm going to say, you know what, he's arrived, he's figured it all out. What I would say, though, he is still pretty young, okay? And a couple years ago, he did have over 30 touchdown passes, so he's somebody I would keep on my radar, okay? I need to see a couple more weeks before I'm going to be convinced that he's going to be a viable option for you in fantasy once again. So all 3 of those guys, you look at Brissett, Keenum, Bortles, great games today, but let's not get too excited. There's other better options out there for you. What about Sterling Shepard? Had a big day today. 7 catches, 133 yards, and a TD. Is he a guy to pick up? Well, he's good. I think this guy's got a bright, bright future in the NFL, okay? But he's stuck in a tough situation. One, you got Beckham, okay? You got Marshall there. You got Evan Ingram at tight end. And you've got Manning, who's so hit and miss at times, and Manning struggles. So unless somebody gets injured, I like Sterling Shepard for the future. I think he's got some talent, but I think he's going to be another one of those wild. It's going to be very hit or miss. He had a big game today. But if you look at it, for example, the target distribution for this game, he had 10 targets. But that was behind Marshall, who had 11, and Beckham had 13. And he's also competing once again with Shane Vereen and Ingram for targets. So once again, he's not a guy that I would roll with week in and week out. If you're really desperate, you could start him. But once again, unless somebody gets injured or unless Marshall becomes extremely ineffective and they bump Sterling up to number 2, once again, it was a good game for him, but you need to hold out. You need to temper your expectations there. So what about Chris Hogan as an option out there? He's available in a number of leagues too. And so what do you do today? Well, he goes out today, has 4 catches, 68 yards, and 2 TDs. The week before, he had 5 catches, 78 yards, and a TD. So maybe he's the guy, right? Maybe he's getting all that extra targets that were lost when Edelman went down this year. Is that the way we should look at him right now? Well, I would say this. Even today in the game, he had a good game. Gronk and Cooks were ahead of him in targets. Danny Amendola is only 1 target behind him. And last week on New England, the running backs had a total of 13 targets. Now, I think he's a hit or miss wideout, and I think that's what you're going to get all season 1. It's very hard to pin down New England wide receivers or even running backs. They're a team that's a little bit talented. They like to spread the ball around. Okay, last year in 5 games last year, right, he had 609 total yards, and 4 of his 6 TDs were scored in those 5 games. He averaged 121 yards a game. That was great, right? But the other 13 games, he averaged 31 yards per game. So I think that's what you're going to get. Okay, he runs hot or cold. There's just too many mouths to feed there. Here's my advice on Hogan if he's out there. Once again, he's a guy that maybe be a number 5 guy for me. I don't want to start him. I would plug him in there. If you do own him, sell high. That's what I would do right now. People are going to be hyped up. I think you could get something for this guy. Move on to somebody more dependable than him. Once again, he's going to have some big games for you, and then he'll disappear for 3 or 4 games. So once again, don't get caught up on the hype. He's not going to maintain these sort of numbers. How about Shawn Watson? See a guy out there you can look at. Now, he started 2 games. Okay, now if you look at his quarterback rating, 1, 2, and 3, his first game, his quarterback rating was 60.4. He bumped it up to 75.9, and today his quarterback rating was 90.6. So we're seeing improvement every game. He's getting better. Each week he's getting better. He's starting to understand the game. He's catching up to it, the speed of it. He's very physically talented. He's a first-round pick. Now, he's still a rookie, and there's going to be bumps. There's going to be struggles at this point. I think he has more dynasty value, and you could start him if you're very desperate. Once again, I love the progression of this young man. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. But once again, we have to be careful about getting too excited. Once again, he is still just a rookie. Okay, let's just stay away from it. I'm just going to tell you right now, just stay away from the hype, okay? Marseilles Lewis, he went out today. He had, was it 4 TDs that he had? Or something like that. Anyways, to me, it doesn't matter. He had a huge game, but here's what people are going to do. They're going to be all jacked up. They're going to be excited. They're going to be grabbing this guy left and right as their tight end waiver pick. But the first 2 games, right, he had a total of 4 targets and 0 catches, okay? And every once in a while, an NFL player will do this, where they'll just blow up for a huge game. Last year was John Cohen. 2016, he has 3 TDs in 1 game. I remember last year the waiver wire blew up. People were grabbing him left and right. He finished the year with only 4 TDs. He only had 1 more TD the entire season. He finished with a total of 37 rushing yards for the whole year. It happens. It happens where players have a great game like that. Now, last good year he had was 2010. He had 700 yards and 10 TDs. But every year since then, his number has been on the decline. He's nothing but a second. He's a second option on teams in terms of tight end. So once again, don't get excited. Don't overpay for this guy. If he's out there and you're desperate, you could pick him up. But once again, don't get excited. Don't use him as your number 1 waiver claim this week. Once again, Marseilles Lewis had a good game, but I think it was more a fluke than anything. It was just a situational play that worked out. Here's another one out there. Jacksonville defense went out, had another great game. Now, we've hyped them all year long in our preseason rankings and our videos, and they're owned in less than 45% of leagues. This is a team that spent a lot of money in draft picks last 2 or 3 years to improve the defense, and they've arrived. They are a top 5, top 10 defense. They are solid. So once again, if you're looking for a quality defense, snatch this defense up. And I think they're only going to get better as the year goes on. Chris Carson, the guy that we talked about in deep sleepers, we've talked about in waiver picks, yet he's still available in 25% of leagues. So if he's out there, you need to get him. Now, today he didn't have a great game. He had an okay game. He did have a TD. But here's the thing that was great. Once again, he did have a TD, but he was the primary ball carrier on that team. It's very clear that Seattle's going with Chris Carson as their number 1 back at this point. So if he's out there, if you're in that league where he's available, you need to grab this guy. Once again, he's the real deal at this point. He's going to be their number 1 guy going forward unless there's an injury or something. So a little update. Once again, we talked about him last week. We had some people message us and say, "What's really going on with Josh Gordon?" Well, I'll tell you what's going on with Josh Gordon. Okay, all the rumor, what we're getting at this point, all the feedback we're getting, that he's clean and he's about to apply for reinstatement. And then reports are that he has above a 50% chance of being reinstated this year. So they think there's a decent chance of being reinstated. He's about to get out of rehab any day now, and all reports are he's done everything the NFL has asked him to do. Now, why would you pick up a guy like this? It feels like a wasted bench space, which is one of the things we preach against. Don't waste bench space. But he's far, far too talented. This is a guy in 2013 had 87 catches, for 1,646 yards and 9 TDs in only 14 games. He's as talented as any wide out there. He's good as Brown, Julio Jones, Beckham. If he comes back and if he plays, he's only 26 years old, and he has so much talent that he's worth taking that chance on. So on some of my keeper leagues that I have, I've stashed him on my bench. Now, once again, if I get desperate and I need somebody else out there, once again, I'll certainly drop him. But for a couple weeks, just to see how it develops, I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to stash him and just see what I hear. Once again, he could be a huge steal for me, and he could be one for you too. Another guy that we talked about before is Foreman here, running back of Houston. He's etching out more and more carries, again, a bigger role in this offense. He added something else kind of into his repertoire this week, and he had 2 catches for 65 yards. So not only is he getting the carries, but they're using him in the passing game. He's younger back. He looks quicker. He looks better than Lamar Miller. Once again, he's not going to take over Lamar Miller right now, but he's certainly a guy that's going to continue to see more carries, and we believe by the end of the year he could become that #1 guy. So keep your eye on this guy here. Now, when we talk about the Chicago Bears and the running game specifically, they had a huge game today, both running backs, Howard and Cohen. Tarik Cohen, right? Howard goes for 23 carries, 138 yards at TD. But he adds on to that 5 catches for 26 yards. Okay, now Cohen goes out, Tarik goes out. He has 12 carries for 78 yards and 4 catches for 24 yards. So how do we make sense of this? Well, here's what we've been telling you from the get-go. If you listen to anything that we have said, right away, people got excited. They said, you know what, Howard's in a timeshare. It's a running back by committee. Tarik's the real deal. And we said it's not going to work out that way. Now, granted, Jordan Howard had some injuries. He has a bad shoulder, dinged up. He didn't get a lot of carries in one game. Part of that was game flow, the fact that they fell behind. Okay. But Cohen is not going to become the lead back. He's 176 pounds. Howard's 225. There's a 50-pound difference. Okay, Tarik can't handle the carries. He can't get 20 carries a game running between the tackles. It's not going to happen. He's a very talented, fast, quick player. He's a gadget player. They're going to get him the ball, but I think it's mostly in the passing game. You'll see him get a few carries here and there. You'll see him come out of the backfield. In fact, many times they'll actually use him in 2 running back sets. But I think what we saw today is the way it's going to be going forward. Once again, Tarik's going to get maybe 8 to 10 carries. Maybe he'll get 7 or 8 targets in the passing game. But Howard's going to be your horse there. He's going to be your workhorse. He's going to get 20, 25 carries a game. We told you that a couple weeks ago. Before this happened, a lot of people are surprised by what happened to Jordan Howard. We are not. We've been saying it for weeks. Once again, you got to be able to read between the lines and know what's going on here. Once again, this is the way it's going to shake out. What you said today is a much better indication of the way it's going to be down the road. Devin Funchess. Now, we highlight him as somebody that you could start this week against New Orleans because we thought New Orleans got a bad pass defense. But Carolina struggled. He didn't have a great game. He didn't have a bad game. But Cam Newton was beat up, and just they didn't do a whole lot. But I'll say this now. Kelvin Benjamin, okay, looks like he might be hurt. And then you also have Greg Olsen with a broken foot. And today, so Devin had 10 targets in this game. And so if Calvin stays out with injuries and the fact that Olsen is hurt, he's definitely a guy that you could use moving forward. Once again, 10 targets, that's a lot of volume for any wide receivers. And that's what I really look at when I look at productivity, is not just their numbers, but how many targets they get. And are they being actively used in the offense? We saw with Hooper, the tight end for Atlanta, a lot of people got excited week 1. We only saw 2 targets, and we said, that's a real concern for us. And sure enough, his numbers have dropped considerably. Now, what about right here? Which wide receiver is it, Lees or Hearns? Well, what we have said for a while is we felt like Hearnsman maybe is a better option, but we also said that Marquez Lee's got a better PPR option, and I think it's still playing out that way. Marquez Lee's seen more targets, more catches, and I think he had more yards today. But 2 weeks in a row, Hearns saw the pay dirt. So once again, it's really hard to figure out which guy to go with at this point. Neither one are great options. It's 50-50. Roll the dice. Once again, I think that Marquez Lee has a better PPR value. I think Hearns are going to get in the end zone, so he probably gave him greater value in standard leagues. Once again, neither one of them are great options. I would say they kind of float between a 4 or 5 wide receiver. Just a few more names to mention here. We got Taylor Gabriel. Taylor Gabriel of Atlanta and Sanu. Well, if you look at both of those guys, once again, Gabriel last year had 35 catches, 576 yards, and 6 TDs. He had a good game today. They even stretch the field. Not going to get a lot of targets, but once in a while he'll have a good game. And Sanu is another guy who occasionally have a good game, but neither one of them are great options. So neither one of them excite me. Now Hoyer today, or not Toy, but Thursday night, Hoyer had a great game for San Francisco, but the first 2 weeks he was brutal. He's not somebody you want to really consider at this point. So just a few names for you to consider as you look to your waiver wire claims coming up this week. We'll update this 2 days from now. Hopefully you're having fun enjoying the fantasy football year. Hopefully you're doing well. Even if you didn't, even if you started 1-2 or let's say 0-3, don't give up. I've seen people come back. Last year I started 2-5, ran the board, end up winning the league. So once again, don't give up. Have fun, enjoy it. God bless you all.